Right now, as you're watching this, you think you're in control. And you wouldn't be entirely wrong, nor would you be entirely correct. Because you did make a choice to click on this video, and you may make a choice to keep watching it. But beneath those choices, beneath that sense of being the decision maker, there is something else at work. Most of what you call you, your reactions, your impulses, the preferences that feel like yours, aren't being directed by the conscious mind that's listening to these words right now. There is something else running the show, something fundamental, powerful, and yet hidden from your everyday awareness. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand not just what it is, but how to finally work with it instead of against it. Because once you understand this, your understanding of your own self changes completely. If you're new to the channel, welcome to the Yogi's Pod. My name is Dharmitra, and I have been teaching Hatha Yoga and meditation for more than a decade now. For the past few years on this channel, I have mainly talked about mysticism, spirituality, and the deeper territory that opens up when you commit to the spiritual path. And that's still the foundation of this channel. For the past year, I've been in the process of completing my clinical certification from the HMI College of Hypnotherapy, and I've been diving deep into hypnotherapy for many years now. And this has opened up something new for me. A way to bridge the spiritual foundation I've been teaching with tools that work directly with the subconscious mind. And it became a clue to a question that meditation first opened for me. If I am not my thoughts, then what exactly is thinking them? And that question led me to neuroscience, into psychology, and into strange and mystical territories. So this video marks a significant and natural evolution for this channel. We are going to talk about the subconscious mind, not as some abstract concept, but as something real and practical that shapes your daily life. And we are going to explore hypnotherapy as a way to work with it directly. By the end, you will understand how to stop fighting with yourself and start working with the intelligence that's been running beneath the surface. And this might be the missing piece you've been looking for. There is a layer of reality you move through but never see. You swim through it every moment, guided by currents you cannot feel. Every second, your senses are receiving roughly 11 million pieces of information. The texture of fabric against your skin, the hum of electrical appliances, and the micro movements of hundreds of muscles holding you upright, the play of light and shadow, the chemical signals from your gut, and the faint sounds of your own heartbeat. 11 million signals flooding in constantly. And your conscious awareness, it can hold about 40. 40. So, where does the rest go? Into the depths, into what we call the subconscious. Though that name makes it sound like it's somehow less than conscious, when actually it's the foundation upon which the conscious mind rests. It's the vast intelligence that runs your body, stores your memories, generates your emotions, and makes most of your decisions before the conscious mind even knows a choice is being made. Brain imaging studies show this clearly. When researchers ask someone to make a simple decision, press this button or that one, the neural activity predicts their choice appears about 10 seconds before they report feeling that they have decided. 10 seconds before. The decision is already in motion, already unfolding in the subconscious, while the conscious mind sits in the theater watching, believing it's the director. And this explains so much of our frustrations. You know you need to start that thing which you've been putting off, but somehow you don't. You decide tonight will be different, no more late night snacking. But by 10 p.m., you're in the kitchen again. You commit to finally starting that exercise routine, and for 3 days, you're on fire. And then suddenly, you've missed a week and you can't remember why you stopped. You tell yourself you'll stop procrastinating, stop checking your phone so much, stop saying yes when you mean no. And yet, the pattern continues. Is this weakness? Is it about lacking discipline or willpower? I don't think so anymore, because I think the solution is in understanding that your conscious intentions are only a small part of what's driving your behavior. The subconscious has its own agenda, its own reasons for keeping you exactly where you are. And until you learn to work with it, you will keep falling off the wagon and wondering why change feels so hard. Think of a time when you walked into a room and suddenly felt uneasy. You do not know why. There is nothing obviously wrong, no threat, no danger, but your chest tightens and you want to leave. Later, you might notice the room smells faintly of a particular cleaning product. And if you could trace it far enough back, you would find that same smell in a hospital room where a painful experience happened when you were young. The conscious mind has no access to this connection, but the subconscious does. It stored the smell, the fear, the physiology, all as one packet of information. And now, many years later, it's protecting you from what it believes to be danger, even though the danger no longer exists. And this is how we live most of the time, responding to associations we don't remember making, following patterns we never consciously chose, and reacting to the past as if it's the present. And sometimes just willing yourself to change isn't enough. Some patterns live deeper than thought. They are written in the nervous system itself, installed before you had words, encoded as pure sensation and survival response. And that's where we need other tools. The subconscious mind is a learning machine. That's what it's for. And it learns the way all deep learning happens, not through just information, but through experience, through repetition, through the sense of what keeps you safe and what brings you pain. When you learn to walk, nobody gave you a lecture on balance and momentum. You fell, you got back up, you fell again. Slowly, without conscious thought, your nervous system figured it out. Micro adjustments in muscle tension, timing, weight distribution, all happening below the conscious level of awareness. And now you walk without thinking about it. The pattern has become automatic, subconscious. And this is beautiful when the patterns serve us. But the subconscious doesn't distinguish between patterns that help and patterns that don't. It simply records this situation, this feeling, this response. For example, a child reaches out for comfort and is pushed away repeatedly. The subconscious learns connection equals rejection. Stay small, don't need. A teenager speaks up in class and is humiliated. The subconscious learns visibility equals danger. Stay quiet, blend in. An adult tries something new and fails publicly. The subconscious learns risk equals shame. Stay safe, don't try. These are not conscious decisions, they are deep patterns laid down in moments of heightened emotion when the protective instinct was fully activated, and once installed, they run automatically, shaping every future situation that resembles the original one even slightly. In yoga, these are called sanskars, impressions left in the mind by experience, deep grooves that thoughts and behaviors flow into naturally, like water finding the path of least resistance. The yogis understood that these patterns could be observed and through sustained practice gradually worn away. Modern neuroscience has confirmed what these traditions always knew: the brain can rewire itself, new pathways can form, old associations can weaken and fade. This process, the brain's ability to change its own structure based on experience, has been measured and documented. Scans show that people who maintain contemplative practices develop measurably different brain structures over time. Now, the thing is that these changes happen through experience, not through thinking alone. The subconscious responds most powerfully to sensation, to image, and to state. This is why you can know something is irrational and still feel it completely. You tell yourself there is no reason to be nervous before speaking up in a meeting. You know your material, you have prepared, and everyone there is just a person like you. But the moment it's your turn to talk, your heart races, your voice shakes, and your mind goes blank because the subconscious isn't responding to your logical preparation. It's responding to an association. Visibility equals vulnerability, or maybe criticism, or judgment that was installed years ago at the level of experience. So the question becomes, how do you change a pattern at that level? How do you reach down into the subconscious and update the old programming? The answer: through state, through language that speaks directly to that state. And I will explain this. The thing is, you already know how to access the subconscious. You do it constantly without even trying. When you are driving and suddenly you realize you don't remember the last 10 minutes on the road, that's it. That's hypnosis. When you're watching a film and 2 hours vanish in what feels like 20 minutes, that's a trance state. When you're listening to music and the room and all the people in it disappears, that is trance. Trance or hypnosis is simply focused attention, a narrowing of awareness where the conscious mind's chatter quiets and something deeper comes forward. And in that state, the subconscious becomes receptive in ways it isn't during ordinary waking consciousness. And this is how transformation has always worked, even in meditation. You enter a state, calm, present, open, and you hold it. And in that state, patterns begin to shift on their own. Old associations loosen, and new possibilities can happen. The nervous system learns that it's safe to relax, safe to let go, and safe to be here now without the old defenses. Traditional practices understood this intuitively. They knew that chanting, ritual, repetitive movement, and focused breathing all induced altered states where transformation could occur. This is one aspect of it. They didn't need brain scans to know it worked. They had direct experience. And modern hypnotherapy is built on the same foundation, but with precision tools. It recognizes that the subconscious is most accessible when the brainwave state shifts from the fast beta waves of active thinking down into the slower alpha and theta waves of relaxed awareness. Now, let me explain how this works in practice because it's simpler than what most people imagine. So, you're guided into deep relaxation, not sleep. You remain aware, but a state where the analytical mind relaxes its grip. From there, you can revisit memories, not to relive them, but to reframe them. You can locate the moment when a limiting belief was installed, maybe a comment from a parent, a failure at school, a frightening experience, and you can offer your subconscious new information now, not by arguing with it, but by showing it and letting it feel at a body experiential level that the danger has passed and that you are safe now, that the pattern has served its purpose once, but it's no longer needed. And this is where hypnotherapy differs from talk therapy. Talk therapy creates understanding, which is invaluable and it has its place. But understanding lives in the conscious mind. Hypnotherapy works directly with the subconscious in its own language. Now, when the subconscious accepts the update, the change feels effortless. You don't have to force yourself to behave differently. You just naturally respond differently because the underlying association has shifted. For example, a person who's been terrified of public speaking for decades suddenly finds themselves calm on stage. Not because they learned techniques or practiced affirmations, but because they went back to the moment the fear was born, maybe childhood humiliation, and gave that younger self the safety and compassion they needed. The fear, no longer necessary, begins to dissolve. The reason this works has to do with how memory is stored. Each time you recall a memory, you actually reconstruct it. And in that moment of reconstruction, it becomes temporarily changeable. Hypnotherapy takes advantage of this window by guiding someone into a deeply relaxed state and then gently revisiting the source moment. We can introduce new context at this point, new resources, and new meaning. The memory gets restored with this updated information, and the pattern shifts at its root. Here's what I noticed over years of working with people. Some could change habits through awareness alone, while others couldn't, even with the same dedication. Because something else, something deeper, was driving the behavior. And then there were people where it was mixed. Willpower and discipline worked beautifully for some behaviors, but for one particular pattern, they would hit a wall. They could change everything else through conscious effort, but this one thing remained stubbornly in place. So I started to see that the difference wasn't about how dedicated someone was. The difference was in how deeply the pattern was encoded. Some behaviors are more like preferences. They respond to awareness and choice. But others are coping mechanisms installed in moments of real or perceived danger, written into the nervous system at a level that the conscious mind cannot simply reach. And that's what led me to hypnotherapy. Not because what I was teaching wasn't working, it was, and it remains foundational, but because I kept encountering this edge, this place where awareness created space but couldn't create change, where people could see their patterns clearly and still feel powerless to shift them. And I implemented this first for myself for many, many years, and then now in my work with others. And what I discovered was that it filled exactly the gap I have been sensing. It gave me a way to work directly with deep, ingrained patterns. And I watched people who had been struggling with the same pattern for decades experience genuine and most times lasting, permanent change. Not through more discipline or stronger willpower, but through finally reaching the subconscious in its own language and updating the original programming. For example, someone who has been binge eating since childhood traced it back to a moment of profound loneliness, where food became the only reliable source of comfort. And once we could go back to that moment in trance and give that younger self what they actually needed: connection, safety, belonging, and compassion, the compulsion around food began to dissolve. Not because they were trying harder to resist it, that never works, but because the subconscious no longer needed it as a coping mechanism. Some patterns aren't about weakness or lack of discipline, they are coping mechanisms. And you can't willpower your way out of a coping mechanism that was installed when you genuinely needed it. You have to go back to the source and show the subconscious that the circumstances have changed. So, when I talk about hypnotherapy now, I'm talking about it as a natural extension, another tool in the toolkit for working with consciousness at every level. Together, these approaches create something far more powerful than any one single method alone. The subconscious isn't working against you, it's working for you in the only way it knows how. Every fear, every habit, every limiting belief, it's all an attempt to protect you based on the best information the subconscious had at that time. When you were small and powerless, staying invisible might have been the safest strategy. When you were hurt by someone you loved, closing your heart might have been necessary for your protection. The subconscious did exactly what it was supposed to do. It learned, it adapted, and it kept you alive. I experienced this myself. For years, I struggled with perfectionism. One of my earlier videos in this channel is about it. And I would start projects with enthusiasm, but the moment they needed to be finished or shared, I would freeze. Everything had to be flawless before I could let it out into the world, which meant nothing ever really felt ready. I would revise endlessly, second guess every decision, the self doubt. I could see the pattern clearly, but that did not change it. I used to think perfectionism was bringing me a higher quality of work, a better work ethic. And partly that was true. But the negative side was significant. A lot of mental friction, a lot of mental stress. I would set such high goals for whatever work I was doing that reaching them became stressful and a lot of times very impractical. And it wasn't until I worked with the subconscious that I understood what was really happening. Perfectionism was a defense mechanism. If it's perfect, then there will be no criticism. If it's flawless, I'll be protected from all forms of judgment. The belief was simple. Perfectionism equals safety. The pattern had been running for years, and all it took was recognizing that the protection I was seeking through my perfectionism was actually preventing me from moving forward. Imperfection isn't failure. This is what I learned. And being seen, even with your flaws, is how you grow. The subconscious, feeling that truth in the body, let go of the old patterns, and the patterns dissolved. Whatever pattern you've been carrying, whatever fear, whatever block, and whatever voice that says you can't or you shouldn't or you're not enough, it has a source. It was installed in a moment, and it can be updated in a moment. You are not one self. You are a collaboration between many systems, many voices, many versions of you formed at different times for different reasons. The conscious mind that plans and analyzes, the subconscious that protects, the witness that observes it all, and the body that remembers what the mind forgets. And most of the time, these parts aren't speaking to each other. They're pulling in different directions. The conscious mind says go, the subconscious says stop. Body says danger, the mind says you're being irrational. You feel divided against yourself, and you think the solution is to pick a side and to conquer the parts you don't like. But that is not the way. The way is integration, bringing all the parts together and learning the language each one speaks. Understand the roles each one plays. Stillness teaches you to witness without being swept away, to create space between stimulus and response. Hypnotherapy teaches you to work with the subconscious directly, to understand its patterns, to update the beliefs that no longer serve, and to become fluent in its language so you can guide it towards healing instead of just watching it on repeat. And when all these parts work together, something extraordinary happens. You stop fighting yourself. The war, the inner conflict ends. And in the peace that follows, you discover capacities you did not know you had. Creativity and courage that was hidden. A version of yourself that was always there beneath the layers of protection. Everything you have been seeking, the freedom, the peace, and the sense of coming home to yourself, is already within you. You just have to clear the path. The best way to experience what I've talked about is through practice. And I've created a free guided meditation called A Guided Meditation to Know Deep Self-Acceptance. You can find it here on YouTube or download it for free from theyogispod.com, where there are other guided meditations as well. There is a lot more coming on topics that can directly help you and understand yourself better so that you can create real change in your life. If you want to work with me directly or stay connected through the newsletter, Waves of Awareness it's called, and on Instagram, all the links are there in the description. Take care and see you in the next one.